James A. Baker, who had been chief of staff, was exhausted. I mean, that's a 24/7, 365-day-a-year job. And so they masterminded a switch. And Don Regan said to me, he inherited, when Mike left, my appointment to replace him was a decision of the president and Mrs. Reagan.
Big shoes to fill.
And Michael Deaver.
Right.
And the reason ultimately I quickly found out was the astrologer. That Mike influenced the president's schedule every day. He was getting direction from Mrs. Reagan on astrological input into the president's schedule. Quickly, what Mrs. Reagan's astrologer was doing was judging from the stars what were good days, say for a press conference or the State of the Union address, going outside the White House into public events. A major thing that Joan Quigley did was make judgments as to what were going to be safe days or bad days. And Michael had to translate that input into the scheduling process. I came in and I had to do the same. The situation with Mike was that he informed, without Mrs. Reagan knowing it, James A. Baker, the chief of staff. So there was no conflict there. When Don Regan and Baker switched jobs, I had been designated to replace Mike. And that decision was predicated on Mrs. Reagan and the president feeling that particularly she had confidence in me to do what Mike had done for her. The problem was Don announced to me right after we met, shortly after he got the position of assistant to the president and chief of staff, that he did not need a deputy chief of staff. I don't need a deputy. You can perform all the functions, but I don't want to have someone think that I need a deputy. So I then became the only assistant to the president, I like to say, for nothing.
But you were the gatekeeper of sorts. You were in charge of President Reagan's schedule.
Yes.
For a period of time,
yes.
Several years, right?
Yes.
So.
Yes.
And obviously the importance of the trust that the Reagans had in you.
Absolutely. And it was a great honor, something that I accepted, and it was difficult at times. Then once I can show you that in Don Regan's book, he announces to the world the reality of an astrologer, and in that attributes it to me, in that he even says in the book, poor Bill, I was giving him such a hard time for inexplicable changes in the president's schedule without my permission. And there was a lot of tension growing. And then I went to Mike Deaver and Mrs. Reagan and said, this isn't going to work. He has got me on a short leash, and I think he has to be brought into it. So Michael Deaver and Don, I didn't attend that meeting, they met together. And then again, shortly after that, I got a call from Don saying, hey, Bill, I'm sorry. If I'd only known, I wouldn't have given you so much trouble. So that's my story.
Bill?
Another bugaboo I have about today's baseball game, Major League Baseball. When I first became introduced to baseball, going to the Yankees, actually went to the Brooklyn Dodgers once, going to the Mets. The pitchers, they pitched, the starting pitcher was in the game for 6, 7, 8 innings, maybe pitched the whole game, okay? That was not uncommon. A reliever, maybe he came in for an inning or two. And
Right.
today, they seem to change pitchers at the drop of a hat. They'll have managers will call in pitchers to pitch to one batter, and they seem to be impatient. Take them out. I don't know. I'm very frustrated by watching those type games from when I think back to years ago.
Oh, there's no question. The game began to get more specialized in the 80s. Sparky Anderson started a bit with the Tigers. Roger Craig, who was Sparky's pitching coach, then out to the Giants, then Tony La Russa, and all of a sudden the game became more specialized, where instead of carrying 8 pitchers and 17 position players, now some teams carry 12 and 13 pitchers. And as a result, when I came, Bob Gibson, I'll use this story about Bob Gibson, when Red Schoendienst would come out to the mound and said, well, you know, you're getting knocked around a little bit, I think I'll go to the bullpen. Gibby would look to the bullpen and say, who are you bringing in? Oh no, I can do a better job than he can. But nowadays, relief pitchers oftentimes, because they have one specialty pitch like Mariano Rivera did, now you're going to actually a better pitcher at that particular time. And so the complete game and the pitchers pitching 275, 300 innings are gone. The game is the same, but the way the game is handled and played is different. I can't say that I like it as well, but that is today's game.
But is that fair to a starting pitcher, that he's not given the opportunity to stay in for 6, 7, 8 innings? You know, unless you were hammered, you know, where the team you were pitching against really hit you hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were in that game.
Well, the trade-off, Danny, is that in my era, you were paid on wins.
Right.
So if you had a 1-to-1 game and the manager came out and he was thinking about taking you out, you stated your case. I want to stay in this game. I want to get a chance to win, because in the off season, when you negotiated your contract, if you won 17 games instead of 12, that was big. Well, today, the wins are not as important to starting pitchers in terms of their contract, as most pitchers that are solid starters or even mediocre starters are going to have a 2-3 year contract at some pretty big dollars. So it's not as damaging to their contract or their ego to get taken out of the game. In fact, many of them, when they leave the game after 5 innings, they say, well, I did my job today. I pitched 5 innings. If I only pitched 5 innings and had a 5-1 lead and had to leave the game, my teammates would look at me like, what's wrong with you? You couldn't pitch 9 innings today. And that's not the player's fault. That's just the way the game is managed today.
Well, Eric Bogosian, the Holocaust, which was genocide, of course, launched by Adolf Hitler from a period of roughly 1938 to or 36 to 48, has had abundant coverage to this day through written books and plays and movies and media accounts. And yet the Armenian genocide, which, you know, proportionately was, I mean, when you consider the amount of people that were victims here and the so much less in population in the world at that time, it's been eclipsed in a sense by the Holocaust. It doesn't get the same level of status or recognition as the Holocaust does, you know.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the Turkish government has actively suppressed this story. The Turkish government is a major ally of the United States. You just have to get out a map and note that they are border with Russia, they border with Iraq, Iran. They loom over the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. So the United States doesn't want to step on their toes. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I think it's somewhat absurd, but they have over the years stepped in and forced. There was a movie that was going to be made in the 1940s, and they just stopped the movie from.
Really?
They went through the State Department.
The U.S. government.
U.S. government
Really?
Through the State Department. They forced. It was a movie based on the 40 Days of Mossadegh, the Franz Werfel novel. and they stopped the movie from being made. And they have continuously, I mean, they've now got our president who, prior to being president, used the word genocide, will no longer utter the word genocide. Samantha Power, who is our person at the UN, wrote a book about this, the story of these guys and the Armenian genocide. She's also not allowed to ever mention the genocide, and this is because of its policy. But I would never compare one of these tragedies with another one. I mean, what happened in Germany and Poland and Eastern Europe during World War II and just before is just, the magnitude is mind-boggling, as is this story also. One thing that should be kept in mind, though, is that Germany was an ally of Turkey in World War I, did participate in this genocide, and there's even indication that many of the young soldiers, German soldiers stationed in Turkey during this period, were later SS officers during World War II. So there's a direct connection between Germany and Turkey, between the Armenian genocide and the Jewish Holocaust of World War II. So.